Today we're going to talk about Republicans getting caught in the act of lying about some made-up scandals, and I interview Secretary of Transportation Pete Buttigieg about the best way to sell the American Jobs Plan to Republicans, his response to Ted Cruz falling asleep during Biden's address to a joint session of Congress, and about how to reconcile his appearances on Fox with their ramped-up efforts to spread disinformation. I'm Brian Tyler Cohen, and you're listening to No Lie. So a growing problem that we've seen lately is just this explosion of straight-up disinformation from the right. In just the last week alone, if you'd only consume right-wing media, you'd think that Joe Biden was limiting red meat to 4 pounds a year. You'd think that Kamala Harris's children's book was being handed out to every migrant child at the border. You'd think that John Kerry leaked state secrets to Iran. And look, hearing lies from right-wing media isn't some huge revelation here, but the swings are clearly getting bigger. So I think that we have a responsibility to kind of call these lies out right away before they metastasize, before we're left with a Hillary's email situation where some nothing burger story suddenly becomes a months-long saga because the right wills it into existence and the rest of the news outlets are forced to pick it up. So the first story is that Biden is limiting red meat to 4 pounds a year or 1 burger a month. And here's how this story started. Biden pledged at a virtual climate summit that the U.S. would cut its greenhouse gas emissions by 50% by 2030 compared to 2005 levels. And so the British rag, the Daily Mail, published a story titled, "How Biden's Climate Plan Could Limit You to Eat Just 1 Burger a Month." And the article says, quote, "Americans may have to cut their red meat consumption by a whopping 90% and cut their consumption of other animal-based foods in half. Gradually making those changes by 2030 could see diet-related greenhouse gas emissions reduced by 50%, according to a study by the University of Michigan's Center for Sustainable Systems. To do that, it would require Americans to only consume about 4 pounds of red meat per year. It equates to consuming roughly 1 average-sized burger per month." So that's the article. And then Fox News, the most watched news network in the United States, decided that was enough due diligence for them, and they posted a graphic of exactly those same red meat stats. Only one tiny problem: that study from the University of Michigan has nothing to do with Joe Biden. It's an academic finding from the year before he was even elected president that simply studied the effect of Americans making a 50% cut to their consumption of animal-based foods and a 90% cut to their consumption of beef in particular, and they found that there would be a 51% reduction in diet-related U.S. greenhouse gas emissions between 2016 and 2030, which is interesting and a helpful guide for sure, but an academic paper suggesting that greenhouse gas emissions would be reduced if Americans hypothetically ate 90% less beef doesn't somehow mean Joe Biden is forcing Americans to eat 90% less beef. It's someone's research paper, not a policy from the President of the United States. And yet, that didn't stop those on the right from treating it as if it was. So Lauren Boebert, of course, tweeted, "Joe Biden's climate plan includes cutting 90% of red meat from our diets by 2030. They want to limit us to about 4 pounds a year. Why doesn't Joe stay out of my kitchen?" Texas Governor Greg Abbott tweeted, "Not gonna happen in Texas." Idaho Governor Brad Little tweeted, "Idahoans also have beef with this agenda and for dinner." Here's Fox host Jesse Waters repeating the claim on Fox.
"In order to reduce emissions to hit Biden's target. That means you're only allowed to eat 4 pounds of red meat a year. That adds up to a burger a month. That's it."
And even after this story was debunked, here's Kevin McCarthy still, days later, repeating the same claim.
He just continues. He wants control of your life. He's going to control how much meat you can eat. Can you imagine that?
Because the point isn't the truth. The point for them is to whip their viewers and their base into a frenzy with bullshit claims, knowing full well that their retractions won't be seen by even a fraction of the people who see the original claims. And so they'll spread scary graphics with pictures of hamburgers and let it ride across the entire internet because this story was only ever about one thing: saying whatever needs to be said to hurt Democrats. And then there's the Kamala Harris children's book situation. Basically, another right-wing rag, the New York Post, published an article that every migrant kid entering the U.S. was getting welcomed with a copy of her book. Only it turns out that every migrant child was not getting welcomed with a copy of her book. One single copy of her book was donated to a shelter. And of course, this story was fact-checked, leading to the writer of the story to come onto Twitter, say that she was forced to write it despite it being inaccurate, and then resigned. But that wasn't before the article already served its purpose, because nearly everyone in the right-wing ecosystem had already made sure that it spread to the farthest corners of their echo chamber. You have Ronna McDaniel, the RNC chair, tweeting, after learning officials are handing out Kamala Harris's book to migrants in facilities at the border, it's worth asking, was Harris paid for these books? Is she profiting from Biden's border crisis? Tom Cotton tweeted, the Biden administration's weakness caused a surge of illegal immigrants. Now they're forcing taxpayers to buy Kamala Harris's book to give to those illegal immigrants. Lauren Boebert tweeted, why is the Biden regime using taxpayer dollars to provide illegal immigrants entering the U.S. with a copy of Kamala's children's book? Jim Jordan said, Vice President Harris refuses to visit the southern border, but some migrant children are given a copy of her book upon arrival to the USA. Nothing to see here. So of course it's every clown that you'd expect, but the point here is the same. It is to pump this crap out, even if it doesn't come close to passing the smell test, because it's not about reporting the news or responding to any legitimate grievance. It's about painting Democrats in a bad light, even if that means just straight up lying to do it. Like, we've long since passed this being some response to Democrats' actual actions. Now they're just operating in their own alternate plane of reality. They're just inventing scandals out of thin air, pretending to get outraged, and pumping it out to their viewers. Like, stand for something. Stand for some conservative values, whatever they are. But if all you believe in is just spreading lies and pretending Joe's coming for your hamburgers and Kamala's lining her pockets from migrants buying up her children's book, all you're doing is showing that today's Republican Party represents literally nothing other than lying to its own supporters and drumming up fake scandals because you know you can't win in a way that's legitimate. And by the way, this isn't new. Like, we've seen this before. Basically, the right knows that it can find any insignificant story to exploit. And so we heard about Hillary's private email server every day for a week, and then another week, and then a month, and then 2 months. And then they'll start to accuse the mainstream media of being biased in favor of the Democrats because they haven't dedicated any time to this bombshell story. And because the mainstream media wants nothing less than to be labeled as the liberal media, they'll pick up these stories too, to show, see, we cover both sides, even though the other side is all bogus. And so now you have all the media talking about these bullshit stories, all because the right figured out how to game the refs. And before you know it, Hillary's emails become some international story that's taking up all the oxygen, and the entire world is talking about how there's never been a greater political scandal in history than Hillary Clinton using a private email address for government business. And then, on top of all of that, when Ivanka Trump gets caught having used a personal email account to send hundreds of emails in violation of federal records rules, which you would think would be a pretty big deal considering you couldn't go more than 4 minutes in the lead up to the 2016 election without hearing about it, that story disappeared like a fart in a hurricane. And that should be all the proof you need that none of this was ever about emails, none of it was ever being done in good faith, and that it was only a strategy where the GOP got rewarded for drumming up fake outrage, and then they realized how easy it was to get everybody else on board. And so when I see it happening again, whether because Biden is coming to take away your hamburgers or the vice president's getting rich off of selling her children's book to migrant kids, we have a duty to call it out, because one side has clearly recognized the benefit to just standing there and telling bald-faced lies to its supporters. And by the way, look at where it's gone from there. You think Hillary's emails was bad? You think Benghazi was bad? The natural conclusion of this was the insurrection on January 6th. That was the direct result of a culture where outright lies were not only like unchallenged, but actually taken as sacred, as sacrosanct. And so you have the big lie started by Trump, and then in the 2 weeks after the election was called, Fox News cast doubt on the election results nearly 800 times. 800 times. And while that insurrection failed in its immediate goal, which I guess was to stop the certification of the election, 3 in 4 Republicans right now don't believe that Joe Biden won the election. And that's despite Trump losing, 65 court cases, and Bill Barr's DOJ and the DHS's cybersecurity unit saying that it was secure, and Republican governors and secretaries of state also saying it was secure. Over and over again, the GOP is getting positive reinforcement from telling these outright lies, and we on the left have to be able to learn. We have to be able to recognize that we can't just say, LOL, this is so ridiculous, because for the people who watch right-wing media, this is their truth. This is the information they're getting. And if we let these lies fester without rebutting them, without debunking them, we're going to find ourselves in the same position that we found ourselves in with Hillary's emails and Benghazi and Obama's tan suit and the left canceling Dr. Seuss and Joe Biden taking away your precious hamburgers and Kamala Harris juicing book sales using migrant kids. And if that means that I use this entire monologue to call out the bullshit so that even one person who didn't know might now know the truth, then that's worth it. Because it might have worked for them before, but our job is to make sure that this doesn't work again. To listen to my interview with Secretary of Transportation Pete Buttigieg about the best way to sell the American jobs plan to Republicans, his response to Ted Cruz falling asleep during Biden's address to a joint session of Congress, and about how to reconcile his appearances on Fox News with their ramped up efforts to spread this kind of disinformation, check out the interviews playlist on my YouTube channel.